Did Panasonic make a mistake going full frame? And Nikon Z-mount strategy versus Panasonic's L-mount gamble. For years, Panasonic was the dominant force in the hybrid camera market, particularly with its Micro Four Thirds lineup. Cameras like the GH5 set the standard for mirrorless video capabilities. But as the industry shifted toward full-frame mirrorless, Panasonic made a bold decision and introduced the L-mount system, entering an already crowded market dominated by Sony, Nikon, and Canon. Now with Nikon expanding its Z-mount ecosystem into red cinema cameras, it raises an important question. Did Panasonic back the wrong horse? If the GH7 had been released instead of the GH6, could it have changed the trajectory of Micro Four Thirds? This video explores Panasonic's full-frame gamble, Nikon's smarter Z-mount expansion, the failure of the GH6 and why the GH7 came too late. When Panasonic introduced the L-mount system in 2018 with the S1 and the S1R, the idea was simple: compete with Sony's A7 series, Canon's RF system, and Nikon's Z-mount by offering a strong alternative with pro-level video features. However, the execution was flawed from the start. By 2018, Sony had already solidified its dominance in full-frame mirrorless. Canon was expanding the RF mount rapidly, and Nikon, despite some early struggles, was already integrating Z-mount into its full camera lineup. Panasonic stuck with its contrast-based depth from defocus autofocus, while competitors had superior phase detect systems. Autofocus became a deal breaker for many hybrid shooters. Unlike Sony, which had a massive native lens lineup, L-mount relied heavily on Sigma for affordable lenses. Panasonic's own Pro L-mount lenses were expensive, and Leicas were even more costly. While Panasonic's video specs were strong, they weren't enough to pull hybrid shooters away from Sony or Canon, which offered better autofocus, better lens support, and more brand familiarity. As a result, Panasonic's full-frame cameras have struggled. Most people have only bought into the system because they are cheaper than the competition, but a pricing advantage alone isn't enough to win over professionals. Meanwhile, Nikon took a different approach. Instead of chasing Sony and Canon directly, Nikon expanded Z-mount into professional filmmaking. While integrating Z-mount into red cinema cameras, Nikon has made its mount more versatile, appealing to both photographers and high-end filmmakers. In 2023, Panasonic finally fixed one of its biggest weaknesses: autofocus. The S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX introduced phase detect autofocus for the first time in a Panasonic camera. The improvement was immediately noticeable, making Lumix cameras far more competitive in the hybrid market. But by then it was too late. By 2023, most hybrid shooters had already moved to Sony or Canon. Autofocus had been the biggest reason people avoided Panasonic cameras. Fixing it 4 years too late meant that many users had already left the Lumix system. Had Panasonic introduced phase detect autofocus back in 2018, the L-mount system might have gained more traction. Instead, by the time they got it right, Sony had already secured its position as the dominant hybrid camera brand. While Panasonic was busy focusing on full frame, they finally released the GH6, the long-awaited successor to the GH5. While the GH6 delivered excellent video quality, it didn't offer enough of a leap forward to reignite the interest in Micro Four Thirds. So in 2024, Panasonic finally gave us what the GH6 should have been, the GH7. Essentially, the GH7 is the Micro Four Thirds version of the Canon R5C. It had better autofocus, no streaking issues, and internal RAW recording that made it one of the most powerful Micro Four Thirds cameras ever. The addition of internal RAW recording puts the GH7 in direct competition with cinema-focused cameras, making it one of the most versatile Micro Four Thirds cameras ever produced. Had the camera come out in 2022, Micro Four Thirds could have remained a serious competitor in the hybrid market. Now the GH7 has to win back an audience that Panasonic lost 3 years ago. So looking back, was Panasonic's decision to go full frame a mistake? Did they need to enter full frame? Maybe. The market was shifting and they needed to adapt. Did they execute it well? No. Autofocus was an issue for years, and by the time they fixed it, many had already moved on. Did they abandon Micro Four Thirds at the worst possible time? Absolutely. If they had released the GH7 instead of the GH6, Micro Four Thirds could have remained strong in the hybrid video space. Meanwhile, Nikon played its cards smarter. Instead of chasing Sony in hybrid cameras, they expanded Z-mount into high-end cinema cameras, making Z-mount a viable option for both photographers and filmmakers. Panasonic, by contrast, got caught in the middle. Too slow to compete in full frame and too distracted to push Micro Four Thirds forward when it mattered most. So where does Panasonic go from here? Panasonic has a chance to fix this, but they need to make a decision. Do they want to be just another full frame brand competing with Sony and Canon and Nikon? Or do they want to reclaim their leadership in hybrid filmmaking by pushing Micro Four Thirds to its limits? Right now, they're stuck between two worlds, and unless they define what they stand for, they risk losing their relevance in both. Thanks for watching.